Chapter 1. Dust and Echoes. The rain in Neo-Kyoto hadn't ceased for 3 days. It was a persistent, greasy drizzle, clinging to the chrome of the sky cars and plastering the already grimy streets with a sheen of oil and decay. Kael didn't mind. He found a certain austere beauty in it, a fitting accompaniment to the silence Head cultivated. Silence and the scent of aged wood, polished bronze, and something faintly metallic, the residue of 1,000 years of dust. He knelt on the flagstone floor of the shrine of the Silent Bell, meticulously polishing the exterior with a worn linen cloth. The shrine itself was a marvel of fractured time. Constructed from dark, almost black granite, it was swallowed by a tangle of overgrown bamboo and ancient, gnarled willows. The air hung thick with the scent of damp earth and the phantom echoes of chanted prayers, whispers from a past that both fascinated and terrified Kael. Had taken the position of janitor at the shrine 6 months ago, a sabbatical orchestrated with the cold, calculated precision of the Kaeli Consortium, his family's sprawling empire. They specialized in financing, logistics, and increasingly, weaponized information. The Imperial Navy, the pride and power of Neo-Kyoto's coastal defenses, relied heavily on their funding. But Kael, heir to the Iron Bell and a legacy of ancient power, found the endless meetings, the boardroom battles, and the suffocating weight of familial expectation utterly unbearable. He craved the quiet, the simplicity, the feeling of something real. The consortium, predictably, had scoffed. A glorified sweeper? His father, the stoic and ruthless consortium chairman, had barked over the comms. A waste of your potential, Kael. You are destined for greater things. Head ignored them, of course. Head routed the consortium's security detail with a subtle manipulation of pressure points that left them bruised, disoriented, and utterly humiliated. A carefully calibrated demonstration that he wasn't a man to be trifled with, regardless of his current occupation. The dockyards, a sprawling complex of shipbuilding, storage, and defensive outposts, were the consortium's largest client. It was there, amongst the grime and the arrogance of Captain Vance's riot control contractors, that Kael found his irritation simmering. Vance was a brute, a man sculpted from steel and cynicism, with a voice like grinding gears and a penchant for cruelty. He treated Kael with a dismissive contempt that bordered on fascination. "Look at this," Vance had boomed one afternoon, brandishing a heavy shock baton. "A man who sweeps floors. You think you can defend yourself with that broom?" Head proceeded to relentlessly demonstrate, batting at Kael's outstretched arms with the baton, forcing the janitor to dodge and weave with a practiced grace that clearly surprised him. "Learn a lesson, boy," Vance had sneered. "Men who sweep floors have no spine in the face of authority." Kael, of course, had taken the bait. Head moved with a fluid, almost imperceptible shift in weight, deflecting the baton with practiced ease, a series of movements born from years of intense training Head deliberately suppressed during his sabbatical. The contractors, momentarily stunned, had returned the favor with a barrage of verbal abuse. Scum, they called him. Worthless. Head endured it all, silently, a ghost in his own life, a man existing in the periphery of Neo-Kyoto's power structure. Had perfected the art of invisibility, masking his abilities, minimizing his presence. It was, he realized, a carefully constructed illusion, built on years of concealed training. Just then, a clear, lilting melody drifted from the edge of the shrine's courtyard. Elaratan. She was a street musician, a young woman with fiery eyes and a spirit that burned as brightly as the flames of her pipa. She played with a raw passion that seemed utterly incongruous within the shrine's ancient stillness. Kael paused his polishing, listening to the intricate patterns of her music. She was playing a melancholic ballad, a tale of lost love and forgotten heroes, her fingers dancing across the strings with astonishing dexterity. Had noticed her a few times during his shifts, always sketching out scraps of food from her meager earnings, a handful of dried fish, a bruised apple, and offering it to him with a shy smile. "Thank you," he murmured, returning the small offering. "Your music is refreshing." She laughed, a bright, unexpected sound. "You find solace in old stones, janitor?" "I find a quiet place," he replied, careful to keep his voice neutral. "A place to think." Suddenly, a group of Vance's men burst into the courtyard, their riot gear clanking, their faces grim. Captain Vance was at their head. "What's this?" he bellowed, spotting Elira. "A troublemaker? I'll have her detained." Before Kael could react, Vance ordered his men to seize Elira. She resisted fiercely, dodging their clumsy attempts to restrain her. Just as one of the contractors was about to deliver a brutal blow with his baton, Elira, with a sudden decisive movement, struck Vance with the bow of her pipa, connecting with his shoulder with surprising force. He crumpled to the ground, clutching his arm. The contractors froze, stunned. Kael, watching from the shadows, felt a familiar surge of energy, a tingling sensation that began in the core of his being and radiated outwards. It was the resonance of the iron bell, dormant for so long, now stirring. He didn't consciously activate it. It happened instinctively, a protective response. The shrine seemed to shift, the air thickening with an unseen power. The weathered stones pulsed with a faint blue light. And then, without a deliberate movement, Kael stepped forward, a whirlwind of contained force, ready to unleash the secrets buried within. Chapter 2: Echoes of the Unspoken. The aftermath of Elira's strike hung heavy in the air, a tangible silence punctuated only by Vance's ragged breathing and the confused murmurs of his contractors. The contractors, hardened men used to dominating lesser figures, stared at Kael with a mixture of terror and bewildered respect. They hadn't encountered anything like this before. A janitor, apparently, who could dismantle a riot baton with such effortless precision. Vance, nursing his injured shoulder, glared at Kael with a venomous disbelief. You use that?" he choked out, gesturing vaguely at the shimmering air around Kael. "What sorcery is this?" Kael remained motionless, a study in controlled calm. He carefully picked up a stray pebble, turning it over in his hand as if considering its weight and composition. "It's simply a response," he said, his voice low and measured, carefully calibrated to avoid intimidation. "A response to aggression. The shrine Heir resonates. It remembers." Before Vance could launch another tirade, a contingent of Imperial guards, alerted by a discreet signal from a distant outpost, arrived, their polished armor gleaming in the late afternoon sun. They were a stark contrast to the brutal contractors, disciplined, stoic, and radiating an aura of unquestioned authority. The captain of the guard, a stern-faced man named Lu, recognized the energy signature immediately. His eyes narrowed, acknowledging the potential threat. "Captain Vance," Lu announced, his voice carrying the weight of Imperial command. "You are under arrest for attempted assault on a civilian and violation of the sanctity of Imperial property." Vance, already bruised and humiliated, sputtered a futile protest, but the guards swiftly restrained him, their movements precise and efficient. The contractors, sensing the shift in power, retreated, their riot gear clinking nervously as they followed loose orders. As the guards led Vance away, Elira cautiously approached Kael, her pipa resting in her lap. "You saved me," she said, her voice softer than had heard before. "You really are different from how you seem." Kael offered a small, genuine smile. "Appearances can be deceiving, Miss Elira. I assure you my intentions were purely defensive." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Imperial officials, summoned by Lu, meticulously documented the incident, speaking in hushed tones about dormant arts and unforeseen potential. They questioned Kael relentlessly, probing his background, his knowledge of the shrine, and, most importantly, the source of his power. Kael skillfully deflected their inquiries, offering vague explanations about training and focusing internal energy. He didn't reveal the iron bell or the true extent of his abilities, fearing premature exposure. Meanwhile, a small group of scholars from the Imperial Academy of Arts arrived, led by a wizened old man named Master Jian. He was a specialist in ancient martial techniques and legendary artifacts, and he immediately recognized the unique resonance of the shrine and the unnerving precision of Kael's actions. "The echoes of the iron bell," Master Jian murmured, examining the shattered remains of Vance's baton with a magnifying glass. "It has been dormant for centuries. A legend dismissed as myth." He turned to Kael, his eyes filled with a profound mixture of curiosity and concern. "Young man, you possess a rare and potentially dangerous gift. You must learn to control it, to understand its origins." As Master Jian began his examination, a strange occurrence unfolded. The shrine seemed to react to their presence, the weathered stones growing warmer, the bronze bells emitting a low humming vibration. Kael felt a growing intensity within himself, a subtle pressure building in his chest, as if the shrine itself was channeling energy through him. Suddenly he winced, clutching at his chest. He gasped, his eyes widening in surprise. "The resonance. It's becoming amplified," he whispered, his voice strained. "I'm feeling connected. To the shrine, to this place, to something older." Master Jian observed Kael intently, his expression shifting from curiosity to a wary assessment. "You're not simply reacting to external stimuli," he said, his voice urgent. "You're responding to the bell. You're beginning to understand its rhythm. But the bell demands balance, young man. Uncontrolled power can be a destructive force." Just then, the air shimmered again, and this time it was deliberate. Kael's hands began to glow with a brilliant blue light, intensifying with each passing moment. He raised his hands, palms facing upwards, as if gathering energy. The shrine pulsed with a vibrant blue hue, reflecting in the terrified eyes of Master Jian and several of the arriving scholars. "It's not just about defense," Kael said, his voice now imbued with a newfound power and resonance. "It's about return, about bringing balance back to a world that has forgotten its harmony." He brought his hands down, and a wave of energy rippled outwards, gently pushing aside the scholars and Master Jian, who instinctively stepped back, awestruck. As the light subsided, Kael looked at Ilara, a question in his eyes. She offered a small, encouraging smile. "You're learning," she said simply, a quiet confidence in her voice. "You're beginning to listen." Chapter 3. Echoes of the Silent Tide. The shimmering aftermath of Kael's revelation hung heavy in the air of the shrine, a tangible residue of unleashed power. Dust motes danced in the sudden blue light, settling on the ancient bronze bells that hadn't chimed in centuries. Master Jian, a man who had dedicated his life to understanding the subtleties of internal energy, remained unnervingly still, his face a mask of intense scrutiny. He circled Kael slowly, his hand resting on the cool, worn stone of a pillar, as if attempting to draw information from its very essence. "The resonance seats not just amplification," Master Jian finally said, his voice low and deliberate. "It's a reflection. The iron bell doesn't merely grant invulnerability, it draws upon the ambient energy of the world, the echoes of past battles, the sorrow of the land, the hopes of the people. You're tapping into a reservoir of ancient power, a tidal current of potential. But to control it, truly wielded that, requires discipline, understanding, and most crucially, a conduit, a link to the very spirit of this place." He pointed to the shrine's central bell, a colossal bronze behemoth covered in intricate carvings depicting celestial dragons and mythical beasts. "This bell has remained silent for generations, waiting for someone to awaken it, to become its voice." Kael moved towards the bell, running a hand over its surface. It felt strangely warm beneath his touch, humming with a vibration that resonated deep within his bones. Suddenly, an image flashed in his mind. A fragmented sequence of battles, warriors clad in ancient armor, wielding weapons that shimmered with the same blue energy had manifested, all orchestrated with a terrifying grace. He recoiled, clutching his head. What was that? He gasped, his face pale. The bell is showing you, Master John explained, his voice laced with a sudden urgency. It's allowing you to glimpse its history, to feel the weight of its legacy. It's demonstrating its potential and its danger. You've touched a raw nerve, young man. The bell remembers everything. Just then, Alara approached, carrying a small wooden flute. She began to play, a melancholic melody that seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of the shrine. The music was simple, almost mournful, but as she played, the blue light around Kael intensified, pulsing in time with the notes of her flute. The air crackled with energy, and the ancient bells began to tremble, a low, resonant hum building into a deep, almost subsonic thrum. The music, Kael said, his eyes fixed on Alara. It's a key. It's not just a beautiful sound. It's a frequency. The bell responds to harmony, to balance. Your music is correcting the imbalance. As he spoke, Captain Vance and his heavily armed guards burst into the shrine, having tracked Kael's activity. Vance, a mountain of muscle and arrogant disdain, sneered. Well, well, well. Look what we have here. A glorified sweeper, playing with the forces of the heavens. He advanced towards Kael, baton raised, a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes. I was wrong about you. You're dangerous. But before Vance could strike, Kael moved. It wasn't a calculated attack. It was an instinctive reaction, a surge of blue energy emanating from his palms, directed not at Vance, but at the ground beneath the contractor's feet. The earth buckled and cracked, sending Vance sprawling into a heap of armor and broken stone. The guards, stunned by the sudden eruption of power, hesitated. Alara's flute continued to play, now faster, more insistent, and the blue energy around Kael spiraled outwards, creating a shimmering shield that deflected Vance's frantic attempts to regain his footing. Master Jian, witnessing this unprecedented display of power, stepped forward, positioning himself between Kael and Vance. "Stop!" he commanded, his voice amplified by the bell's resonance. "This is not a matter of conquest. This is a matter of balance." As Master Jian spoke, the shrine itself seemed to respond. The bronze bells began to chime a clear, resonant sound that cut through the chaos, a sonic wave that knocked the contractors off balance, momentarily disrupting their focus. But then, something unexpected happened. The sound shifted, evolving into a complex layered harmony, a cascading torrent of musical notes that seemed to emanate from Kael himself. He wasn't simply using the iron bell's power, he was conducting it, channeling it through his own body, through Alara's music, through the very essence of the shrine. It was as if the shrine's silent history, its accumulated battles and sorrows, were being channeled into a weapon of unparalleled force. The blue light intensified, blindingly bright, and for a moment, Kael felt a profound connection to something vast and ancient, a force far older and more powerful than he could ever have imagined. He understood then the iron bell wasn't just a weapon, it was a bridge, a conduit to a forgotten realm of martial arts, a legacy that he was now destined to carry on. The reckoning had begun. Chapter 4. The Echoes of Resonance. The dust settled, a thick, shimmering haze clinging to the remains of the dockyard contractors. Silence, heavy and absolute, replaced the chaotic shouts and the shattered metal. Captain Vance, pale and bruised, was being led away by a squad of Imperial guards, his face a mask of bewildered rage. The few remaining contractors, their riot gear dented and their confidence utterly shattered, stared at Kael with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. Alara, untouched and unharmed, continued to play her pipa, the melody now subtly altered, infused with the lingering resonance of the shrine's reaction. She wasn't playing a song, she was weaving a net of sound, a delicate, intricate pattern that seemed to soothe the raw energy still crackling in the air. Kael, kneeling before her, felt a profound sense of gratitude, coupled with a burgeoning understanding of the immense power he now wielded. Master Jian was right, he said, his voice still carrying that low, resonant quality. It's not just about striking. It's about conducting. He reached out, his hand hovering near Alara's pipa, a gesture of hesitant trust. The shrine, it's not just a building. It's a nexus. A repository of martial intent, amplified by centuries of practice. Master Jian, a man etched with the wisdom of countless battles and the stillness of 1,000 meditations, approached slowly. His movements were fluid, economical, like water carving through stone. The iron bell is not a tool to be wielded, he said, his gaze fixed on Kael. It is a voice that must be listened to, understood, and harmonized with. You've tapped into something truly extraordinary, Heir, a power that could reshape the very foundations of this empire. As he spoke, the bronze bells of the shrine began to chime again, a rhythm subtly different from before, a counterpoint to Alara's pipa. Kael felt a pull, a subtle but insistent tug at his consciousness, a sensation of being drawn into a deeper current of energy. He instinctively reached out, consciously attempting to synchronize with the bell's resonance. Suddenly, the air around him shimmered, not the brief, blinding flash of the previous display, but a gradual, undulating distortion, like heat rising from pavement. The sounds of the city, the distant clang of a blacksmith, the calls of merchants, the rumble of carriages seemed to fade, replaced by a deeper, more primordial sound, a hum that vibrated in his bones. He saw it then, a fleeting vision, not through his eyes, but through his very being. A vast chamber filled with warriors, clad in shimmering armor, engaged in a ballet of lethal grace. Their movements weren't driven by aggression, but by a deep understanding of flow, of balance, of the interconnectedness of all things. They wielded weapons, not swords and spears, but instruments of sonic power pipes, drums, gongs, each contributing to a symphony of destruction and creation. The echoes, Master Jian breathed, his voice hushed with reverence. The masters of the resonant arts. They practiced a style lost to time, a style that didn't simply break the opponent, but shattered their will, their understanding of reality. The vision vanished as abruptly as it had appeared, leaving Kael breathless and disoriented. He understood now the iron bell wasn't merely granting him invulnerability. It was granting him access to a lineage of warriors who had mastered the art of using sound as a weapon. It was a lineage that stretched back to the very origins of martial arts in China. This is overwhelming, he admitted, struggling to control the torrent of sensations. I feel echoes of every battle ever fought within this shrine. Alara stopped playing, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and concern. The shrine is communicating with you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's showing you its memories. Kael reached out and took her hand, finding a surprising warmth beneath her delicate skin. I need to learn to control this, to harness this power without letting it consume me. It will test you, Master Jian said, his gaze unwavering. The echoes are seductive, promising unimaginable power. But unchecked, they can corrupt, turning even the noblest intentions to ruin. You must find the balance, Heir. You must learn to listen not just to the sound, but to the silence between the notes. Suddenly, a piercing shriek shattered the quiet. A contingent of Imperial guards, led by a stern-faced Captain Lei, materialized at the edge of the shrine's courtyard. They carried energy rifles, their barrels glowing with a menacing blue light. Heir Kael. Captain Lei's voice boomed across the courtyard. The Emperor demands your immediate presence at the Imperial Palace. He has summoned you to answer for the incident at the dockyards. He paused, a grim smile playing on his lips, and to discuss the rumors circulating amongst the elite. Rumors of a janitor who can shatter the very foundations of power. Kael looked at Master Jian, then at Alara. The echoes of the resonant arts surged within him, a torrent of raw power waiting to be unleashed. He knew with a chilling certainty that this was just the beginning. The reckoning had begun, and he was standing at the precipice of a war that would not just change his life, but the fate of Neo-Kyoto. Chapter 5. The Emperor's Echo. The Imperial Palace was a labyrinth of polished jade and echoing silence, a place built on the hushed weight of generations of imperial decrees. Kael, dressed now in the muted gray robes of a favored student of the Imperial Guard, felt utterly alien, a weed amongst meticulously manicured orchids. Captain Lei, a man carved from granite and seasoned with years of political maneuvering, flanked him with unsettling precision. Behind them, a cohort of guards, each a study in controlled power, monitored the periphery with laser-focused eyes. Master Jian, surprisingly, had insisted on accompanying him. The old master's presence, a quiet ripple of ancient authority, seemed to subtly deflect the palace's oppressive atmosphere. "Observe," Jian murmured, his voice barely audible above the distant murmur of the court. "The Emperor seeks not to punish, but to understand. He recognizes the anomaly, and he seeks to exploit it." The Emperor himself, the Dowager Empress Mei, sat upon a throne sculpted from a single block of obsidian. She was older than Kael imagined, her face a road map of wrinkles, etched by decades of political calculation, yet her eyes held a disconcerting sharpness, an unsettlingly cool intelligence. "Kael," she began, her voice a carefully modulated instrument of power, "the events at the dockyards have caused a considerable disturbance. The news has spread like wildfire. The common folk whisper of miracles, of shattered steel, of a janitor who defies the very laws of physics." Captain Lei stepped forward. "Furthermore, Your Majesty, there have been reports of increased seismic activity near the shrine. Minor tremors, dismissed initially as natural occurrences, but now magnified by the unsettling events." Kael remained silent, absorbing the implications. He understood instinctively that they weren't interested in justice. They were studying him, cataloging his abilities, assessing his potential as a weapon. The incident at the dockyards wasn't merely an act of defiance. It was a demonstration, a calculated unveiling of a power that the Imperial Court had long suppressed, believing it lost to legend. "We received several accounts of individuals fleeing the area," the Dowager Empress continued, her gaze sweeping over the assembled guards. "Men of considerable influence, invested in the expansion of the dockyards. Their apprehension, Your Majesty, suggests a more profound disruption than initially reported." Kael's hand instinctively moved to the concealed pouch at his belt, feeling the smooth warmth of the iron bells pendant beneath his robes. The pendant, a perfect sphere of blackened bronze, throbbed with a subtle resonance, a testament to the immense power it contained. He knew that showing any outward sign of its activation would be a fatal mistake. Suddenly, a voice smooth as polished jade interrupted the tense exchange. "A fascinating development, Your Majesty." Turning, Kael found himself facing a young man, no older than himself, dressed in the immaculate uniform of the Imperial Guard's elite division, the Silent Blades. This was Captain Zhao, a rising star known for his ruthlessness and his proficiency in the application of sonic weaponry. "I have been analyzing the data recovered from the scene at the docks," Captain Zhao stated, a small, unsettling smile playing on his lips. "The residual energy patterns are remarkably similar to those recorded during the legendary battles of the Iron Bell Masters. Specifically, the resonance shatter technique. It's astonishing." A low hum filled the room, emanating from Zhao's wrist-mounted device, a sophisticated sensor designed to detect and analyze subtle energy fluctuations. The device pulsed with a steady blue light, painting a complex schematic of the energy signature Kael had unleashed. Furthermore, Zhao continued, his voice laced with a chilling curiosity, our intelligence suggests a correlation between these energy spikes and the recent disappearance of several of the dockyard's key engineers. They've been observed engaging in intense meditation sessions, attempting to capture the resonance, as they put it. Kael felt a cold dread grip him. It wasn't just the Emperor who sought to control him. It was the elite themselves, eager to weaponize the ancient arts. The echoes he wielded weren't merely a power, they were a key, a lock that the most powerful figures in Neo-Kyoto desperately wanted to unlock. Master Jian, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, subtly placed a hand on Kael's arm. The echoes are drawn to strong wills, Heir, he whispered, his voice a low rumble. They seek to amplify, to dominate. You must resist control. The silence between the notes is your only defense. The Dowager Empress Mai, her expression unreadable, rose from her throne. Kael, she said, her voice gaining a sharper edge. We are prepared to offer you a position within the Imperial Guard. A position of immense responsibility and immense influence. You could be instrumental in safeguarding the stability of our empire. Kael looked at Ilara, who stood silently by his side, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and understanding. He saw the flicker of concern in her gaze, and realized that this was not just about his fate. It was about the future of the shrine, of the forgotten arts, and of the fragile balance between power and compassion. Thank you for your offer, Your Majesty, Kael said, his voice carefully measured. But I have other commitments. He paused, drawing upon the resonant energy within him, a faint shimmer of blue enveloping his hands. I believe my work is elsewhere. The Dowager Empress' smile vanished. A disappointing response, Heir. But I suspect you underestimate the long reach of the Imperial Court. Chapter 6. The Resonance of Stone. The rain in Neo-Kyoto hadn't stopped. It was a relentless, oily drizzle that clung to the chrome of the hovercars and slicked the polished stone of the Imperial Palace, reflecting the oppressive gray sky. Kael, clad in a simple, worn tunic, a deliberately chosen disguise, though the iron bell's influence was starting to subtly alter the weave of the cloth, stood with Ilara amidst the courtyard of the Emperor's private gardens. The Empress May, a woman sculpted from jade and icy calculation, regarded them with a disconcerting stillness. Around them, a dozen Imperial guardsmen, clad in burnished bronze armor, shifted uneasily, their hand-held energy pistols humming softly. The meeting had been called, ostensibly, to discuss the unforeseen events surrounding the Imperial Bell Festival and Captain Vance's brutal suppression of the shrine. However, Kael sensed the true purpose and attempt to extract him, to reintegrate him into the intricate predatory dance of Imperial power. You've demonstrated an unusual proficiency, Heir Kael, Empress Mai said, her voice a low, carefully modulated tone. Your actions, while undoubtedly effective, have disrupted the established order. The dockyards were a key, strategic asset. Disrupting their operation, eliminating the men responsible, it's a dangerous precedent. Captain Zhao, a veteran of countless border skirmishes and bearing the scars of 1,000 battles, stepped forward. He was a mountain of a man, radiating an aura of grim authority. The disruption was rooted in ignorance, Your Majesty. These men were mere tools. Your heir, however, he possessed a technique of devastating power, a power that should have remained hidden. It's destabilizing. We need to understand it, control it, and, if necessary, neutralize it. Kael felt the resonance of his own power, a subtle thrum beneath his skin, respond to Zhao's words. The energy wasn't a weapon, not truly. It was a distortion, a carefully orchestrated ripple in the fabric of reality. He focused, drawing upon the ancient teachings of Master Jian, and visualized a stone, a simple, unassuming granite block. He reached out with his mind, not with force, but with intent, attempting to tap into the inherent vibrations, the echoes of the stone's creation, its time in the earth, its resonance with the surrounding environment. A faint blue glow emanated from his hands, not intense like the display at the shrine, but delicate, almost ethereal. The guardsmen instinctively shifted, their energy pistols lowering slightly. The Emperor's personal guard, usually a wall of impenetrable steel, seemed momentarily disoriented, as if the very air had thickened. "You speak of control, Captain Zhao," Kael said, his voice even and calm. "But control is an illusion. This power, the Iron Bell, it doesn't respond to commands. It responds to balance, to understanding. It's a reflection of the world itself, a force that seeks equilibrium. To force, it is to invite chaos." He gestured with a hand, and the rain, which had been drumming steadily against the stonework, abruptly ceased. A perfect circle of dry ground appeared beneath his feet, a localized anomaly of stillness. The effect was brief, barely a second, but it was enough. Zhao's face tightened with an unsettling mixture of fascination and fear. "Remarkable," he conceded, his voice strained. "The legends were true, but legends are often embellished. This isn't a weapon. It's a key. And you, Heir, are wielding it with a dangerous degree of familiarity." Empress Mai, however, remained unmoved. "It's not familiarity, Captain Zhao, it's arrogance. You believe you can control the flow of power, as if it were a river you could dam. The Iron Bell does not bend to the will of men. It chooses its wielders." She turned her full attention back to Kael. "We are prepared to offer you the opportunity to serve, to guide, to protect the Empire. We can provide you with the resources, the knowledge, the training you require to truly understand and control your abilities." Ilara stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on Kael's arm. "Your Majesty, with all due respect," she said, her voice surprisingly firm, "Kael is not seeking to control power. He is seeking to preserve balance. He understands the potential for corruption inherent in such might." Kael met her gaze, his own filled with a quiet intensity. He knew that Ilara's presence was the key to his resistance, a grounding force against the intoxicating lure of imperial power. "The greatest weapon against corruption," he said, his voice resonating with the faintest echo of the Iron Bell, "is not force, but compassion." Suddenly a tremor ran through the courtyard. Not an earthquake, but a subtle vibration, as if the stone itself were responding to the energy he was projecting. The granite blocks lining the garden walls began to pulse with a faint blue light, mirroring the shimmer of energy around his hands. The Imperial Guardsmen gasped, their energy pistols raised, firing blindly into the intensifying resonance. Empress Mai's eyes narrowed. "The echoes are awakening," she whispered, her voice laced with a primal fear. "The balance, it's shifting." The air thrummed with the unsettling realization that Kael's quiet resistance wasn't just a defiance, it was a challenge to the very foundations of the Empire. A challenge fueled by a power far older and more profound than anyone suspected. Chapter 7. Resonance and Revelation. The Empress' pronouncements hung in the air like a suffocating fog, thick with unspoken dread. The courtyard, once a vibrant space of ritual and ceremony, was now a zone of palpable tension. The rhythmic firing of energy pistols, a jarring counterpoint to the low, pulsing thrum emanating from Kael. The granite, truly reacting, was now actively absorbing and radiating the blue energy, creating swirling patterns that resembled miniature, contained storms. The Imperial Guardsmen, a wall of polished steel and deadly intent, were becoming increasingly erratic, their movements jerky, their aim hopelessly off course. "Silence!" Empress Mai commanded, her voice sharp and laced with a controlled fury. "Say to him." But before the guards could move, Ilara stepped forward again. This time her actions deliberate and unsettlingly precise. She closed her eyes, her fingers dancing across the strings of her pipa. The music wasn't the lilting melody she usually played, but a complex, layered cascade of tones, a resonant harmony designed to disrupt, to unravel. The pulsing blue energy around Kael intensified, morphing into visible waves that crashed against the guards' weapons, causing them to sputter and fail. One guard, overcome by the wave's pressure, collapsed to his knees, clutching his head in agony. "You wield a weapon unlike any I have seen," the Empress said, her voice a chilling whisper, as she observed the scene with narrowed eyes. "A weapon rooted in legend, in a forgotten art. The Iron Bell." Kael didn't react to the guard's assault, remaining seated, a serene expression on his face. He focused his energy, not on attack, but on amplification. The rhythmic pulsing of the courtyard's stone intensified, the blue light expanding, now bathing the entire courtyard in an ethereal glow. He wasn't simply manipulating energy, he was coaxing it, urging it to express itself through the ancient infrastructure of the shrine. Suddenly, the very ground beneath their feet began to shift. Not violently, but with a disconcerting fluidity. The bronze bells hanging from the shrine's rafters chimed in a discordant, overwhelming chorus, each note amplifying the resonant field. The air itself seemed to shimmer, bending light and distorting perspective. Then, it happened. From the heart of the shrine, a full-bodied, shimmering sphere of blue energy coalesced, growing rapidly until it was the size of a small cart. It wasn't controlled by Kael's hands, it flowed from him, a pure expression of his will and the Iron Bell's power. This wasn't just resonance, it was a projection of the shrine's ancient spirit, brought to life. The effect was terrifying. The energy sphere drifted through the courtyard, not seeking destruction, but observing. It scanned each guard, each Imperial Guard, each member of the Empress' inner circle, radiating a cold, intelligent awareness. The guards, already destabilized, began to scream, not from pain, but from a profound sense of violation, as if their very thoughts were being scrutinized. Empress Mai, her face a mask of horror, raised a hand, attempting to command the sphere, but it remained stubbornly independent. "Control it! Seize it!" she shrieked, but her words were swallowed by the escalating resonance. Kael, watching the sphere, recognized its purpose. "It's not a weapon," he said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "It's a mirror. It reveals the truth of those it encounters." As he spoke, the sphere turned, its blue light focusing on Captain Vance, who had been dragged, bruised and humiliated, back to the shrine. The sphere didn't attack instead. It projected an image, a brief, terrifying glimpse into Vance's mind, a montage of his cruelty, his ambition, his casual disregard for human life, culminating in a single agonizing image of Ilara, cornered and vulnerable. Vance, writhing on the ground, let out a guttural scream, not of pain, but of unbearable shame. "The echoes are not simply detecting power," Ilara said, her voice filled with a newfound understanding. "They are unveiling the darkness within." As the sphere continued its silent assessment, a final, shattering revelation occurred. The sphere turned its attention to the Empress herself. Within its blue light, she saw not her own image, but a reflection of the Empire's decaying foundations, the corruption, the inequality, the ruthless pursuit of power that had driven her ancestors to war and conquest. The sphere wasn't just revealing Vance's darkness. It was exposing the rot at the heart of the Imperial throne. Empress Mai collapsed to her knees, a single silent tear tracing a path down her regal cheek. The blue sphere vanished, leaving behind only a lingering thrum and a courtyard filled with broken men, broken faith, and the chilling realization that Kael's seemingly simple act of resistance had unraveled not just the dockyard's expansion, but the very fabric of the Empire. Chapter 8. The Shattered Mirror. The silence after the Empress' collapse was more unsettling than the chaos that preceded it. The courtyard, once a stage for brutal displays of power, was now a tableau of stunned disbelief. Imperial guards, veteran warriors, and even Captain Vance, still rocking violently on the stone, stared at Kael with a mixture of fear and something akin to reverence. The air thrummed with the residual energy of the sphere, a palpable echo of the truth it had exposed. Elara, her face etched with a seriousness she hadn't possessed before, approached Kael. "The echoes," she said, her voice hushed. "They don't just react to power. They respond to intention. They amplify the shadows of the heart." Kael knelt beside her, offering a hand to help her rise. "And the shadow of the iron bell is a particularly potent one." He glanced at the shrine, at the intricate bronze bells that now seemed to pulse with a subtle, contained energy. "It demands balance. A balance between strength and compassion, between protection and judgment." The Emperor, a man who had spent his life surrounded by sycophants and gilded lies, was the first to regain his composure, though his demeanor was irrevocably altered. The lines of his face, previously sculpted with practiced severity, were now etched with a raw, almost primal fear. He gestured towards a contingent of his elite guard, clad in shimmering jade armor, and commanded them to secure the shrine and, more importantly, Kael. "The boy," he stated, his voice a strained monotone, "is to be brought before me. He possesses abilities beyond comprehension. We must understand them. We must control them." The words felt hollow, the pronouncements of a ruler desperately grasping for control in a world suddenly tilted on its axis. The procession to the Imperial Palace was a solemn affair, a carefully orchestrated display designed to project an image of stability. Yet, every glance, every whispered conversation, betrayed the underlying anxiety. The Emperor's advisors, men who had once held Kael in contempt, now regarded him with a cautious curiosity. The Imperial Navy, once a symbol of unchallenged dominance, was quietly recalling its ships from the coastal waters, a clear indication of the threat Kael posed. Inside the Forbidden Court, the Emperor demanded answers. He questioned Kael relentlessly, not about the Dockyards' expansion, but about the Iron Bell, about its origins, about the echoes. Kael, deliberately vague, spoke only of responsibility, of balance, of the potential for great good or devastating harm. He deliberately avoided revealing the full extent of the bell's power, understanding that absolute disclosure would only fuel the Emperor's desire to control him. "You wield a weapon of unimaginable power," the Emperor accused, his voice rising in controlled fury. "A weapon that can shatter empires. Why do you hide it? Why do you play the role of a humble janitor?" It was Elara who answered, stepping forward with a quiet defiance. "He hides nothing, Your Majesty. He simply chooses to wield his power not for conquest, but for protection. He chooses to act with compassion, not with force." As she spoke, the sphere, which had been discreetly positioned within a hidden chamber, reappeared. This time, it didn't focus on Kael or the Emperor. Instead, it turned its unwavering blue gaze upon the Empress herself. This time, the image was not a reflection of corruption, but a fragmented memory, a young May, a bright-eyed strategist, meticulously mapping out the routes of conquest, her face alight with ambition. Then the memory shifted, revealing her as a young woman, desperately defending her family from bandits, wielding a silver dagger with ruthless efficiency. Finally, the image coalesced into a single stark revelation: Mai, as a young imperial scholar, orchestrating a smear campaign against a rival clan, manipulating loyalties, and dismantling their power with calculated precision. The Empress froze, her meticulously constructed fade crumbling before the unflinching judgment of the echoes. She didn't scream, didn't lash out. Instead, she sank to her knees, a silent, broken figure, consumed by the weight of her past. "The Iron Bell," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It reveals what we truly are." The room was filled with an agonizing realization. The Empire, built upon a foundation of ruthless ambition and calculated deception, had been revealed as a monstrous construct, mirroring the darkness within its most powerful leaders. Kael hadn't merely disrupted the dockyard's expansion, he had detonated the Empire's carefully constructed lie. As the last vestiges of the Emperor's power evaporated, Kael knew his true work had just begun. The shattered mirror of the Empress past, reflected by the echoes, had illuminated a path forward, a path not of conquest, but of healing, of rebuilding, and of finally finding balance, not just within himself, but within the fractured heart of the Empire. He looked at Ilara, a flicker of determination in his eyes. "Let us begin," he said, his voice carrying the resonance of the iron bell, with the echoes of forgiveness. Chapter 9. The Resonance of the Silent Halls. The days following the Imperial Bell Festival were a whirlwind of whispered rumors, hushed investigations, and a palpable shift in the atmosphere of Neo-Kyoto. Kael, now openly acknowledged as the heir to the Kaeli Consortium and wielder of the Iron Bell, found himself the reluctant center of a maelstrom. The elite, once arrogant and dismissive, now eyed him with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. Captain Vance, stripped of his authority and exiled to the desolate northern wastes, was a cautionary tale, a physical embodiment of hubris. Ilara, meanwhile, had become a minor celebrity. Her performance outside the shrine, initially a simple offering of music, had transformed into a vigil, her pipus melancholic melodies weaving through the city's anxieties. Word of her bravery, amplified by the surviving dockyard guards, spread like wildfire, and soon, a small contingent of loyal citizens began to gather, drawn to the quiet strength of the street musician and the enigmatic figure who protected her. Kael, accustomed to the sterile calculations of corporate power, found himself navigating a world governed by tradition and deeply ingrained honor. The Kaeli Consortium, despite its modern veneer, remained fundamentally rooted in ancient customs, a legacy his grandfather had meticulously preserved. He began to understand that his sabbatical hadn't simply been an escape. It was a deliberate, carefully orchestrated exercise in observation. A period of quiet study designed to temper his inherited ruthlessness. He spent his time with the shrine's remaining few custodians, men weathered by decades of meticulous upkeep. They weren't warriors, not in the traditional sense. Their power stemmed from a deep understanding of the bells, not as instruments, but as conduits for the earth's resonance. They taught Kael to listen, to feel the subtle vibrations that flowed through the stone, the echoes of countless generations of bell ringers who had practiced the art of the iron bell. The iron bell is not about brute force, young heir, Master Jian. The eldest custodian explained, his voice a low rumble. It's about flow. It's about guiding the energy, shaping it with intention. You fight not with your strength, but with the very fabric of reality. He demonstrated, striking a weathered bronze bell. The sound, though gentle, resonated through the hall, a palpable wave of energy that momentarily caused Kael's muscles to tense instinctively. It was during one of these sessions that a delegation from the Imperial Palace arrived, led by a stern-faced official named Lord Zhao. Zhao, a staunch supporter of the Consortium's influence within the Empire, represented the pragmatic approach that Kael had initially anticipated. He attempted to leverage Kael's newfound power, suggesting a strategic alliance to bolster the Imperial Navy and further solidify the Consortium's control over the coastal trade routes. The Iron Bell, Zhao stated, carefully enunciating the words, represents a unique advantage. It can be deployed to neutralize threats, to deter aggression, a powerful deterrent. When you agree? Kael remained silent, focusing on the faint hum emanating from the ancient bells. He detected no overt hostility, only a subtle undercurrent of expectation, a belief in his power that bordered on reverence. He responded with a single, measured question. What is the purpose of deterrence, Lord Zhao? Is it to prevent conflict, or simply to postpone it? Zhao sputtered, taken aback by the unexpected philosophical turn. The purpose is to maintain order, to ensure the Empire's stability. Kael then executed a subtle maneuver, a barely perceptible shift in his internal resonance, amplified by the shrine's ancient bells. It wasn't a display of force, but a targeted disruption, a minute fluctuation in the air that momentarily disoriented the guards stationed around the room. It was enough. The Empire's stability rests not on military might, but on the hearts of its people, Kael said, his voice carrying a weight that silenced Zhao and his delegation. And those hearts are not fortified by fear, but by understanding. That evening, Ilara found him sitting on the shrine steps, practicing the basics of the iron bell, not attempting to unleash its devastating power, but patiently manipulating the vibrations of a smaller ceremonial bell. "You were remarkably persuasive," she said, her eyes thoughtful. "You spoke to Lord Zhao like a scholar, not a warrior." "Power is not measured in destruction, Ilara," Kael replied, carefully adjusting his grip. "It's measured in influence. And influence, ultimately, comes from truth." He paused, a flicker of vulnerability in his expression. "I've realized that the greatest battles aren't fought with fists or with internal energy. They are fought with words, with choices." As he spoke, the smaller bell resonated with a clear, pure tone, a sound that seemed to echo the quiet determination in his heart, a resonance that hinted at the true scope of the power he wielded. A power not intended for destruction, but for the slow, deliberate work of rebuilding a shattered empire. Chapter 10. Echoes of the Forge. The days following the Imperial Bell Festival settled into a strange, uneasy calm. Neo-Kyoto, accustomed to the sharp edges of corporate aggression and imperial edicts, buzzed with rumors. Whispers of a janitor angel who'd shattered Captain Vance's baton and neutralized a squad of riot-equipped guards circulated through the dockyards and beyond. The official narrative, swiftly crafted by the Kaeli Consortium's influence, painted Vance as a rogue element, acting independently of the dockyards' legitimate expansion plans, a conveniently timed outburst of violence. Kael, meanwhile, remained at the shrine, diligently polishing the bronze bells, a shadow of his former self, outwardly compliant, inwardly simmering with a restrained power. Ilara, however, was different. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a cautious fascination. She had begun to observe Kael with a deeper scrutiny, noticing the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the almost imperceptible tremors that ran through him as he practiced, the way his eyes held a distant, ancient knowledge. She had started asking questions, not of the how, but of the why. "You didn't need to do that, Kael," she said one afternoon, as he meticulously cleaned the chimes of a particularly ancient bell one said to contain the echo of a blacksmith's forge. "You could have simply fled. No one would have blamed you." He didn't look up, continuing his work with slow, deliberate movements. "Flight is a temporary solution, Ilara. It merely delays the inevitable reckoning. But why unleash that force? Why reveal yourself like that?" He finally set down the polishing cloth, turning to face her, his expression unreadable. "The iron bell doesn't simply exist, Ilara. It responds. It responds to imbalance, to injustice, to a desperate need for equilibrium." The shrine had acted as a catalyst. The vibrations of the bells, amplified by the chaotic energy of the festival, resonated with the dormant potential within me. It wasn't a conscious decision to unleash power. It was a correction. He picked up the blacksmith's bell, gently striking it. The sound, deep and resonant, filled the small space, vibrating through the stone of the shrine. The iron bell is not about brute force. It's about manipulating the very fabric of reality, of vibration. It's about finding the harmonic frequency within a situation and applying that force not to destroy, but to realign. Suddenly, a tremor ran through the air, mirroring the vibration of the bell. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but Ilara felt it a disorientation, a momentary shift in perspective. A rat, scavenging near the shrine's foundations, froze mid-scurry, its whiskers twitching wildly. "You're teaching me," she breathed, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You're not just wielding power, you're teaching me how to wield it." Kael nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile gracing his lips. "The iron bell isn't meant to be a weapon, Ilara. It's a tool for understanding, for influencing, for shaping reality to a more harmonious state." He raised the bell again, striking it with a deliberate rhythmic cadence. "It's a lesson in patience, in observation, in knowing when the right hand should strike, and how." As he played, a strange thing began to happen. The air around him shimmered, not violently, but with an almost crystalline clarity. The dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight suddenly seemed to hold intricate patterns, rotating in a hypnotic ballet. It was a visual manifestation of the resonance he was generating, a shimmering echo of the iron bell's power. Suddenly, Zhao's delegation, summoned to the shrine ostensibly to investigate the dockyard incident, arrived. They were a collection of stern-faced bureaucrats, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and thinly veiled disdain. Zhao, a man known for his meticulous control and ruthless pragmatism, stepped forward, his voice carrying an authoritative edge. "Kael," he said, his eyes fixed on the janitor's hands. "The reports are astonishing. Your actions have caused considerable disruption. Explain yourself." Kael paused, silencing the bell. He looked at Zhao, not with anger or aggression, but with a quiet, unsettling calm. "Disruption, Lord Zhao, is often the necessary precursor to creation. Sometimes, the most effective way to build is to dismantle." He subtly shifted his weight, and another ripple of resonance pulsed through the air, this time affecting the bureaucrats themselves. Several of them gasped, clutching their heads, momentarily disoriented. "It seems," Zhao said, his voice losing some of its sharpness, "that this janitor possesses a unique skill set." He glanced nervously at his delegation, then back at Kael. "I will require you to demonstrate this skill further. I intend to observe your manipulation of reality." Kael simply nodded, resuming his practice with the blacksmith's bell. The air around him shimmered again, a silent, potent testament to the secret power he held, a power born not of destruction, but of a profound and ancient understanding. The echoes of the forge resonated, and in that resonance, he began to shape the future. Chapter 11. The Geometry of Silence. The Zhao delegation, now a collection of 10 meticulously dressed bureaucrats, observed Kael's ritual from a raised platform overlooking the shrine's courtyard. The rain had ceased, leaving the bronze bells gleaming with an unnerving, almost sentient, sheen. Zhao, a man perpetually encased in the gray-blue silk of bureaucratic authority, radiated a simmering disapproval. His chief advisor, Master Lin, a wizened scholar rumored to have spent his entire life deciphering forgotten texts, scribbled furiously in a bound ledger. Kael ignored them, his movements fluid and precise as he manipulated the blacksmith's bell, a heavy wrought iron instrument that hummed with a low, insistent thrum. He wasn't simply striking it, he was coaxing a particular frequency, a vibration that seemed to burrow into the very stone beneath their feet. The air grew noticeably cooler, the scent of ozone sharp and metallic. "The disruption," Zhao began, his voice measured and controlled, "is becoming increasingly pronounced. Your manipulation of reality, as you so eloquently put it, is interfering with the meticulously planned renovations of the dockyards." Kael didn't stop. The resonance intensified, and Master Lin suddenly emitted a sharp, involuntary gasp, clutching his chest. He doubled over, a wave of nausea washing over his face. "The harmonics, they are overwhelming," he choked out, his face slick with cold sweat. A junior clerk, a young man named Jian, visibly paled, frantically adjusting his spectacles. Zhao's eyes narrowed. "Lin? Report!" "I don't understand," Lin stammered, regaining some composure. "It's as if the very structure of sound is being rearranged. The vibrations, they're not just noise, they're geometry. This caught Zhao's attention. Head anticipated displays of power, of raw kinetic energy. But the subtle, almost intellectual manipulation Kael was enacting felt far more unsettling. "Explain yourself, Master Lin." "With all due respect, Lord Zhao," Lin said, wiping his brow with a silk handkerchief. "I believe we are witnessing the Iron Bell's true potential. It's not merely about shattering physical objects. It's about manipulating the resonant frequencies of existence itself. Each bell, each strike, creates a specific vibrational signature, a key to unlock hidden forces within the environment. Kael is not merely a warrior, he is a conductor, shaping reality with sound." A murmur rippled through the delegation. Several of them, initially dismissive, began to examine the situation with a newfound seriousness. Even Zhao's face betrayed a flicker of apprehension. Kael finished his practice, the last reverberation of the bell fading into silence. He turned to face the delegation, his expression serene, almost meditative. "I seek not to disrupt, but to restore balance," he said, his voice carrying a weight that commanded attention. "The dockyards, as they stand, are a wound upon this land, a corruption of the natural harmony. I merely intended to temporarily shift the odds." "Temporarily?" Zhao pressed, his tone hardening. "You have effectively rendered our construction teams incapacitated. We are facing delays, escalating costs, and a growing demonstration of uncontrolled power. This is unacceptable." Kael raised a hand, signaling for silence. "Allow me to demonstrate the geometry of silence," he said, and began to move. This wasn't the explosive, disruptive force had displayed before. This was something else. He didn't strike any bells, didn't even touch the ground. Instead, he began to subtly shift his stance, his breathing deepening, his eyes closing. The air around him seemed to compress, the space around the platform shrinking imperceptibly. The bureaucrats, caught completely off guard, felt a profound sense of disorientation. The sound of their own breathing seemed to fade, the bustling city noises receding into a distant drone. It was as if they were trapped within a silent bubble, isolated from the flow of reality. Master Lin, his face now a mask of horrified fascination, finally spoke. "It's a nullification field. His disrupting the resonant frequencies of our perception. His erasing us from the immediate stream of existence." Zhao, despite his carefully constructed fade of authority, visibly recoiled. He instinctively reached for the ceremonial dagger tucked into his sash, his hand trembling slightly. "Stop him!" he barked, but his command was swallowed by the overwhelming silence. Kael opened his eyes, his gaze fixed on Zhao. "Silence is not emptiness," he said, his voice resonating with an unnerving clarity. "It is the potential for creation. It is the canvas upon which all reality is painted." He raised his hand, and a single shimmering blue glyph, a stylized representation of a bell, appeared in the air before him, rotating slowly, absorbing the surrounding light. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. The silence deepened, heavier and more profound than before. Zhao, utterly defeated, lowered his hand. "Arrest him," he commanded, his voice a strained whisper. "And bring me the text of the Iron Bell. I want to understand this madness." As the bureaucrats moved to act, Kael subtly shifted his focus. He focused on the blacksmith's bell, letting the resonance build, weaving a new vibration, a subtle dissonance. The glyph he had conjured before reappeared, but this time, instead of absorbing light, it began to scatter it, like a prism shattering into a million brilliant fragments. The delegates, overwhelmed by the sudden sensory overload, cried out in pain and confusion, clutching their heads and collapsing to the ground. The true nature of the Iron Bell, and Kael's mastery of it, was becoming terrifyingly clear. It wasn't just about destruction. It was about the complete and utter control of perception itself. Chapter 12. The echo of silence. The aftermath of Kael's demonstration was a carefully orchestrated chaos. Zhao, consumed with a desperate need to comprehend the impossible, had secured a dozen of the Imperial Library's most respected scholars and martial arts masters. They were huddled within the Grand Hall of the Ministry of Resonance, a cavernous space usually reserved for the Emperor's most critical deliberations, attempting to dissect the phenomenon Kael had unleashed. The air hung thick with a scent of incense, sandalwood, and a creeping metallic tang, the lingering echo of disrupted perception. Kael, meanwhile, remained at the shrine, meticulously polishing the bronze bells. The silence was a deliberate weapon, cultivated by his burgeoning control of the iron bell. He wasn't engaging, merely observing. Ilara sat beside him, patiently coaxing a mournful melody from her pipa. The music, a counterpoint to the oppressive stillness. He hadn't spoken to her since the revelation. Conscious of the profound shift in their reality, of the weight of his heritage and the terrifying power he now wielded. Suddenly a ripple of panic shot through the ministry. A scholar, Master Lin, renowned for his rigorous analysis of sonic frequencies, collapsed, screaming. He clawed at his eyes, his voice a high-pitched shriek of agony, babbling about infinite hues, a universe within a single note. Within moments, two more followed, each exhibiting a similar debilitating reaction: disorientation, overwhelming sensory input, and a chilling disconnect from reality. The scholars, initially brimming with intellectual arrogance, were now a frightened cluster, desperately searching for a logical explanation. The senior martial arts masters, veterans of countless battles and seasoned in sensing the flow of qi, were visibly unnerved. Their faces were etched with confusion, their hands instinctively reaching for the pressure points on their forearms, a futile gesture against a power that defied physical understanding. This cascade of neurological disruption prompted a direct order from Zhao Dada. "Bring him here. Now!" he roared, his voice amplified by the hall's acoustics. Guards, clad in black silk and bearing intricately carved jade blades, moved with grim efficiency, securing Kael with practiced restraint. As they approached the shrine, Ilara stepped forward, her pipa held firmly in her hands. "Don't touch him," she commanded, her voice surprisingly resolute. "As not a prisoner. Has a tuning fork." Zhao scoffed. "A tuning fork capable of shattering minds. You're a fool, musician. This is a threat to the very foundations of the Empire." Kael remained impassive as he was escorted into the Grand Hall. The scholars, wary and apprehensive, circled him like predators. Zhao, perched upon a towering jade throne, regarded him with a cold, calculating gaze. "Explain yourself, Heir Kaeli," Zhao demanded, his voice devoid of warmth. "What is this iron bell? And what is this manipulation of reality you have demonstrated?" Kael deliberately paused, allowing the silence to deepen. He focused on the intricate carvings of the hall's primary bell, a magnificent bronze piece capable of producing a resonant tone that, according to legend, could shatter stone. He subtly amplified the bell's inherent vibration, drawing upon the iron bell's power. Suddenly, the hall filled with a discordant symphony, not a grand, booming sound, but a subtle, almost subliminal dissonance. The light in the chamber shimmered and fractured, distorting the faces of the assembled scholars. The walls seemed to breathe, the ornate decorations swirling in a dizzying vortex. "The iron bell," Kael began, his voice low and resonant, "is not merely a weapon. It's a key to unlocking the fundamental resonance of existence, the silent vibration that underlies all things." He raised his hand, and a second glyph materialized in the air. This one, a swirling vortex of crimson energy. This time, it didn't shatter or disperse. Instead, It began to draw things in. A scholar's ink brush, suspended mid-air, was pulled towards the glyph with impossible force. A tapestry depicting a celestial dragon was subtly unraveling, its threads seemingly dissolving into the crimson light. Perception, Kael continued, his eyes gleaming with unnerving intensity, is not a passive experience. It's actively constructed. And the iron bell allows one to reshape that construction. The chaos escalated. Screamed as their thoughts, their memories, their very identities seemed to flicker and fade before their eyes. Master Lin, already in a state of near catatonia, let out a final guttural cry before collapsing completely, his body rigid and still. Elara, witnessing the devastation, launched herself at Kael, her pipa a blur of motion. She struck Vance with a resounding blow, diverting the crimson glyph's attention. Kael seized the opportunity, focusing his power, not on destruction, but on silencing the glyph, absorbing its energy, returning it to nothingness. The hall fell silent once more, a profound, unsettling quiet, punctuated only by the ragged breaths of the survivors and the rhythmic tapping of Elara's pipa, a desperate attempt to ground herself in the ravaged reality. Zhao stared at Kael, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. You are a weapon beyond comprehension," he whispered, his voice laced with a chilling realization. "And I, it seems, am a pawn in a game far older and far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined." Chapter 13. Echoes of Resonance. The air in the restored Shrine of Silent Echoes felt thick with residual energy, a shimmering afterglow of the glyph's catastrophic projection. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight, carrying the faintest scent of ozone and something else, an ancient, almost metallic tang. Elara, still clutching her pipa, sat perched on a weathered stone, meticulously cleaning the strings with a dampened cloth, her movements precise and calming. Kael, leaning against the base of the ancient bronze bell, was a study in contained power, his posture relaxed yet radiating an almost palpable tension. "It's unnerving, isn't it?" Elara said, her voice quiet, observing him, like a wound that refuses to heal. Kael nodded, his gaze fixed on the bell. The glyph sought to overwhelm perception, to rewrite reality itself. The iron bell's true strength isn't just in resilience, it's in the ability to actively dismantle forces that threaten to do the same, to silence the chaotic whispers. He ran a hand over the bell's cool surface, and a low, resonant hum emanated from within, a vibration that seemed to settle deep within Elara's bones. "Master Lin was a fool," he continued, his voice low. "Obsessed with the glyph's potential, he failed to understand its vulnerability. It was a reflection of his own fractured mind, amplified by his ambition." The morning progressed with a tentative, watchful calm. The Emperor's Guard, a regiment of heavily armored warriors, remained at the shrine's perimeter, their presence a muted warning, but their curiosity was palpable. Zhao, the scholar who had initially been a frantic witness, now stood a respectful distance away, meticulously documenting the events with a charcoal tablet, his eyes darting between Kael and the restored shrine. Suddenly, the ground shuddered. Not violently, but with a deep, unsettling thrum that resonated through the stone and echoed within Kael's own bones. The bronze bell began to vibrate with increasing intensity, its tone shifting from a comforting hum to a sharp, almost painful dissonance. "The bell," Kael said, his voice urgent. "It's reacting. Something's trying to re-establish contact with the glyph's residue." He rose, his movements fluid and impossibly swift, a predator assessing its prey. The blue energy, usually contained within his palms, pulsed with a brighter intensity, swirling around him like a miniature storm. He extended his hand toward the space where the glyph had manifested, and the air shimmered, distorting the light. This time, however, the response wasn't chaotic. It was deliberate, focused. Kael didn't destroy the residue, he shaped it. The crimson light, instead of expanding outwards, contracted inwards, drawn towards his hand like a moth to a flame. He wasn't simply absorbing the energy, he was redirecting it, channeling it into a controlled, rhythmic pulse. The bell responded, its resonance amplifying Kael's efforts, creating a complex, layered harmony that filled the shrine. The scholars, initially frozen in fear, gasped as they felt a strange sensation, a clearing of their minds, a removal of the lingering haze of the glyph's influence. Master Lin's body remained still, but the rigidity had vanished, replaced by a subtle relaxation. But the effort was taking a toll. Sweat beaded on Kael's forehead, and his face was strained with concentration. The blue energy around him flickered erratically, threatening to surge out of control. "It's draining me," he gasped, his voice strained. The iron bell demands balance. To fully neutralize such a powerful projection requires equal expenditure. Elara, without a word, rose and moved to his side, offering him a small pouch of dried ginger, a familiar gesture from her street life. "Eat this, Kael. Focus on the bell. It's not just a tool, it's a partner." As he chewed, the blue energy stabilized, and he continued to weave the resonant pattern. Then, a new presence entered the shrine. Not a physical one, but a thought, a cold, calculating presence that wormed its way into Kael's mind. Interesting. A student of the Iron Bell. But the bell is but a vessel. True power lies in understanding the flow of discord. Kael froze, his eyes widening in realization. The voice wasn't originating from the glyph, nor from any discernible source. It was emanating from within him, amplified by the Iron Bell. "Someone is influencing you," Elara said, her voice sharp. "Someone is trying to use the bell's power against itself." Kael's eyes scanned the room, searching for the source of the insidious thought. The Emperor's guard shifted nervously, their hands instinctively moving to the hilts of their swords. "It's subtle," he murmured, his brow furrowed in concentration. "A parasitic resonance. It's seeking to corrupt the bell's core, the spirit heart." He raised his hands, and the blue energy coalesced into a shimmering shield, protecting him from the encroaching thought. "I need to disrupt the flow, to create a counter-resonance, but it will require all of my strength." As he began to channel the bell's power, the shrine erupted in a breathtaking display of sound and light, a desperate symphony of defense against a silent, insidious enemy. The game had changed. This was no longer about eliminating a threat, it was about a battle for Kael's very mind. Chapter 14. Echoes of Discord. The silence following the initial surge of resonant energy hung heavy in the shrine, thick with ozone and a nascent, unsettling quiet. Kael, drenched in sweat, slumped back onto his knees, the blue shield flickering intermittently, a desperate, pulsating heartbeat against the encroaching darkness. Elara knelt beside him, her normally vibrant pipa resting silently in her lap, her face etched with a grim determination. The Emperor's guard, a wall of polished steel and stern faces, remained a tense, watchful presence, their movements precise and economical, anticipating a blow that never came. "It's stronger," Kael gasped, his voice strained. "The resonance isn't simply attempting to corrupt the bell. It's feeding on it, amplifying the disharmony, twisting the spirit heart." He clenched his fists, feeling the familiar thrum of the iron bell resonating through his bones, now a chaotic, fractured echo of its former clarity. It's like trying to silence a screaming tempest with a single drop of water. Elara, surprisingly, was the one who offered the first actionable insight. The voice, it wasn't just a thought. It was structured, almost melodic, like a corrupted harmony, deliberately crafted to disorient. She carefully plucked a single string on her pipa, producing a clear, bell-like tone. "I recognize the principles behind the dissonance. It's a technique. A predatory resonance built on exploiting vulnerabilities in the body's chi flow." "Ja." Kael nodded, his mind racing. He desperately tried to map the insidious resonance, to identify the key signatures, the subtle shifts in the flow. He focused on the feeling of the energy, a jagged, biting cold that spread outwards from the iron bell, chilling him to the core. It's targeting my breath, my awareness disrupting my grounding. If I can't find the root, it will overwhelm me. Suddenly, a sharp, stabbing pain erupted in his chest. He doubled over, clutching at the area, and a torrent of images flooded his mind, fleeting glimpses of vast, crumbling cities, of spectral figures manipulating energy, of rituals performed under the crimson glow of a forgotten moon. The source of the influence wasn't merely in his mind. It was a projection, a nightmare woven from the bell's latent power. It's showing me possibilities, he choked out, struggling to maintain control. Dark futures shaped by unchecked resonance. It's trying to convince me that destruction is the only path to equilibrium. The Emperor's guards surged forward, swords drawn. Stand down! You are endangering yourself. Captain Zhao, the stoic commander of the guard, bellowed, his voice cutting through the growing chaos. Kael raised a hand, halting their advance. No, Deem. This isn't a battle of force. This is a battle of will. And it's being waged within me. He focused, forcing himself to breathe deeply, deliberately countering the insidious resonance with a slow, measured pulse of his own internal energy. He visualized the bell, not as a weapon, but as a conduit, a vessel for harmony. Elara, focus on the bell, he commanded, his voice gaining strength. Play a counter melody. Disrupt the discord with a pure, unwavering tone. Elara, understanding instantly, began to play. The pipus music, initially hesitant, grew stronger, more confident, weaving a complex, intricate pattern that seemed to vibrate with an almost unbearable intensity. It wasn't simply music, it was a weapon, a meticulously crafted resonance, designed to unravel the predatory force. As the two opposing resonances collided, the shrine underwent a horrifying transformation. The air shimmered with iridescent particles, the walls pulsed with light and shadow, and the floor seemed to ripple beneath their feet. The blue energy surrounding Kael intensified, becoming a raging torrent, but it was no longer controlled. It twisted and writhed, reflecting the chaotic influence, threatening to consume him entirely. Then, he saw a faint, almost imperceptible distortion within the blue energy, a subtle ripple that mirrored the corrupted harmony. He understood. The source of the influence wasn't external. It wasn't a person, a spirit, or a demon. It was within the iron bell itself, a dormant, residual resonance from a previous owner, warped and corrupted by centuries of neglect. The bell isn't broken, he said, his voice filled with a chilling realization. It's infected. It's trapped within itself. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind, not a cold, calculating intrusion, but a desperate, mournful plea. Release me, Kael froze. He looked at Elara, who stared at him in stunned silence. He understood. He wasn't just battling an external force, he was facing a trapped soul, a prisoner of its own power, desperately seeking liberation through chaos. The revelation shifted the stakes entirely. This was no longer about protecting his family's legacy, it was about freeing a tormented spirit. And he realized, with a terrifying certainty, that he was now inextricably bound to its fate. Chapter 15. Echoes of the Warden. The iridescent shimmer around the shrine intensified, the air thick with a palpable tension. Elara, her face pale but resolute, watched Kael with an unnerving intensity. He hadn't moved since uttering the chilling words, "Release me," the mournful plea. A whisper in the deepest recesses of his mind, reverberated with an age he couldn't fathom. The blue energy surrounding him pulsed in response, no longer a raging torrent, but a contained, almost sentient entity, like a luminous, frantic heart. It's feeding on the shrine's history, he explained, his voice strained, as if speaking above a rising tide. The iron bell's power isn't simply destructive, it's a conduit for the echoes of every warrior who's ever wielded it. This resonate's not benevolent. It's a wound, a festering wound from a warden consumed by its own ambition. He reached out, hesitantly, towards the iron bell itself. The bell was an immense bronze sphere, intricately carved with scenes of legendary battles and celestial dragons. Its surface was dull, almost lifeless, except for the way the blue energy now clung to it, weaving patterns like veins beneath the metal. As his palm brushed against the cold bronze, the mental plea intensified, becoming a desperate, guttural cry. "Don't silence me. Don't extinguish the flame." Elara gasped, stepping back. "What is it saying?" It's not telling me its name," Kael said, his brow furrowed in concentration. "But I can feel its pain." It was a warden, one of the original protectors who sought to use the iron bell to reshape the world, to impose order through absolute control. He was corrupted by the bell's power, driven to madness, and ultimately destroyed himself within its resonance. Suddenly the shrine's transformation accelerated. The walls pulsed with a blinding light, the floor rippled violently, and spectral figures began to coalesce from the shadows, warriors clad in ancient armor, frozen mid-battle, their expressions a mask of anguish and fury. They weren't hostile, merely trapped, reliving their final moments within the bell's trapped echo. "The bell isn't a weapon, it's a prison," Kael shouted, attempting to anchor himself against the escalating chaos. "We have to sever the connection, to calm the resonance, to give it peace." He began to move, not with his practiced martial arts technique, but with a slow, deliberate fluidity, a rhythmic flow designed to channel and control the energy, not to fight it. He envisioned the blue energy not as a destructive force, but as a trapped soul, seeking release. He focused on the mournful plea, visualizing a calming tide washing over the chaos, soothing the tormented spirit. Elara, surprisingly, understood instinctively. She stepped forward, her pipa held aloft. Without a word, she began to play. It wasn't a joyful melody, but a slow, mournful dirge, a lament for lost souls. The notes resonated with a strange power, harmonizing with the blue energy, subtly altering its form. As the music flowed, the spectral warriors began to fade, their expressions softening. The chaotic ripple in the blue energy diminished, the walls ceased their frantic pulsing, and the floor stilled. The mental plea from the bell shifted, becoming less desperate, more tired. Gentle Kael, drawing on a reserve of strength he hadn't known he possessed, reached out and touched the iron bell with both hands. The blue energy surged through him, not as a violent torrent, but as a gentle current, flowing outwards to embrace the bell. He didn't attack, he offered. "I don't want to control you," he whispered, his voice imbued with a profound sense of compassion. "I just want Toto heal you." As he spoke, a blinding flash of white light erupted from the bell, momentarily engulfing the entire shrine. When the light subsided, the blue energy had vanished, replaced by a serene, silver glow emanating from the iron bell. The spectral warriors were gone, vanished completely. The air was still, silent, and utterly calm. Kael slumped to his knees, exhausted, the effort having drained him to the core. Elara rushed to his side, supporting him with a gentle hand. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "You calmed it." Kael nodded weakly, his eyes closed. "It's quiet now. But the bell, it's changed. It feels lighter." Suddenly a new voice, clear and resonant, spoke in his mind. It wasn't a plea, but a recognition. "Thank you, Keeper." Kael opened his eyes, looking at Elara, then at the iron bell, now radiating a soft, silver light. A slow smile spread across his face. "It seems," he said, "that sometimes the greatest power isn't about destruction, but about compassion." He paused, a thoughtful expression on his face. "And perhaps that's what my father was truly missing."